AJ's back, and so are we. I'm Danny Flexen. Welcome to the latest edition of SO Live. Delighted to be joined by not Eamon Khan once again, but an improvement, some might say, in lean Josh Green. Josh, how you doing?
Very well. I think you need to stop with the not Eamon Khan, because it's becoming, you're saying that more times than it actually is Eamon Khan at the moment. So maybe next time we're joined by not Josh Green. So yeah, thanks for having me again anyway.
That's the most politest, the most subtle way of asking for time off I've ever heard. That said, it's not necessarily granted. We don't know for sure if Eamon made it back yet from Saudi Arabia. We assume he did. But he could be on the next series of Banged Up Abroad. Let's wait and see. It's a bit of a dated reference. Don't even know if they make Banged Up Abroad anymore. If they don't, it's a real shame because it was great. We are obviously going to be talking predominantly about Anthony Joshua and whether he has indeed restored boxing's honour, as I went into hyperbolic mode on the headlines this week, or every week. But before I do, please do give us a thumbs up if you haven't already. Also, subscribe to the channel, SecondsOut. We've had a big subscriber boost over the last week, as you might imagine, with everything going on in Riyadh. But we value all of you pretty much equally, so please do subscribe if you haven't already. And send us your questions and comments in the live chat. We'll get through as many as we can. I think it might be a busy one today. But yeah, so at the weekend, very long night, long gaps between the fights. You know, you don't want to... It seems churlish to complain when we're getting so many good fights out in Saudi at the moment, and it is relatively close to British prime time because of the 3-hour time difference. But it was a bit of a test to stay up to the very end. I think Joshua Ngannou didn't start until just after midnight and obviously finished soon after, which I suppose be thankful for small blessings. But yeah, Joshua got the job done in emphatic fashion. Very impressive performance. People are already starting to talk about how, you know, we'd overrated Ngannou perhaps after his performance against Tyson Fury, and obviously the narrative of Tyson Fury potentially underestimating Ngannou in that fight. Josh, when you were watching it unfold in real time, what did you make of it and AJ's performance specifically?
Yeah, really good performance. What are you saying there about people overrating Francis Ngannou? That's just what I guess the promoters there, in this case, Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren, are there to do. They're there to capitalise on the hype around Francis Ngannou and get that fight with Anthony Joshua. So look, they did it exactly the right time after his performance against Tyson Fury, and I think people that watched on Friday night, they'll be singing the praises of Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua's back, and Anthony Joshua's ready for a third world title reign. I was very impressed with what I saw. Of course, we didn't see a huge amount. We didn't see the game plan unfold as such, but the aggression and the ability that we did see from Anthony Joshua, it's not much you can say in a negative way about it. So impressive, but I think there's more to be seen against a more impressive opponent at world level.
So let's go to the chat before I give my kind of take on the performance. PJ says, AJ back to title shot after Valin and MMA guy. I'm guessing, PJ, you don't think that's fair, and it might not be fair, but what is it? It's not what you what is it? It's not what you deserve. It's what you negotiate. And AJ's status as a huge commercial draw kind of supersedes some of that stuff. If it makes dollars, it makes sense, as they say, or in this case, what is it? Dirham out in Saudi Arabia. Ibra Mar says, guys, let's give AJ his flowers because he's saving and breathing life back into big-time heavyweight boxing. Wow, you've gone even more hyperbolic than my headline. Matthew Caldwell, storm in a minuscule teacup. Okay. Timo Hoffman, not the real one, I don't think. Would you grab Frank's hand when you're finally invited to his box? I mean, that's a tender gesture, isn't it, for something so exciting? But yeah, I'd consider it. Depends how much they pay me. Some amounts of money will make people do anything, as I think the meme going around suggests. And Timo Hoffman adds, how accurately can you rate someone after one fight? It's a fair point, but I think it's more a culmination of AJ's recent form, particularly since linking up with Ben Davison. And a lot of people wanted the AJ of old. There was this thing about, you know, being more aggressive, being more gung-ho. And we're certainly seeing that. But it's how much of that is his new mindset instilled in him, at least in part by Davison and team, and how much of it is down to the, to be fair, lower quality of opposition he's facing. You know, it's easier to be gung-ho against the Francis Ngannou than an Alexander Usyk, of course. Mucky says, always said AJ will smoke Fury. Thunder Road says, Josh Green reminds me of a mix of Harry Potter and Joey Barton. I hope he only means looks-wise. Otherwise, you've got, what, a misogynist magician?
That's
interesting. Yeah, that'll be your new nickname. Forget Lean Josh Green. Jay Sharp says, Ngannou in boxing prowess is Charles Martin-esque. No disrespect to Ngannou's power. I mean, I think Charles Martin's actually a pretty decent boxer. He didn't look great against AJ, but he's had some decent performances since then. I think he's technically, as a boxer, much better than Francis Ngannou. Kenny Powers, I think Nick Ball showed everyone he's ready for his first MMA fight. Thoughts? When you're Nick Ball's height going up against someone much taller who's trying to pick you off from the outside, you kind of have to fight like that. There isn't really a manual or an instruction booklet to tell you how you overcome such a massive height disadvantage. But I think he tried to use it to his advantage instead. And I actually thought he won the fight fairly clearly. But we'll come to Nick Ball in due course. Regular Stan says Franny versus Jake Paul. I don't know what you've done to get on Franny terms with Francis Ngannou. Despite what AJ did to him, I still find him quite intimidating, to be honest. And I think AJ probably would if they're ever in the octagon as well. But yeah, so I was a bit surprised how quickly AJ got the job done, I've got to say. Not once the fight was unfolding, because it was clear in the first round that it wasn't going to be a long night for Joshua. But in the build-up to the fight, I expected him to win. I expected him to probably stop Ngannou, maybe go to points. I certainly didn't think it'd be over so early. And maybe I should have thought more about Joshua's mindset, because once he knew what Ngannou had to offer, saw how he shaped up, had a couple of mini exchanges, he obviously lost any respect for Ngannou as a boxer. You know, I'm sure he still respects him as a combat athlete and certainly as a man. But as a boxer, I think AJ knew he was a much different level. He probably suspected that going into the fight, but once they were actually squaring up in the ring, saw how they were, you know, the movement patterns and so on, I think Joshua knew at that point, yeah, I've got this guy and I need to make it as quick and painless as possible. Painless for him, not for Ngannou, of course. That doesn't dispel the fact it was probably the best single shot of Joshua's career. You know, there was the uppercut, of course, against Vladimir Klitschko, the finishing shot against Dillian Whyte. They spring to mind. But that was an absolute chilling knockout. And I think that was reflected in AJ's somewhat muted celebrations at first. But yeah, I think there's been real improvement under Ben Davison. We can definitely see a change in style. But it's whether that change in style and that approach holds up under abject scrutiny of an Alexander Usyk or indeed a Tyson Fury. And we will be talking about AJ's next move in due course. We've got a video out on the channel at the moment talking about what he should do. We'll go over that shortly, but let's just go back to the chat before we do. Timo Hoffman, Nick Ball was getting outboxed for the majority of the fight, and first knockdown was very dubious. UK bias showing, saying it's a robbery. I don't think he was getting outboxed for the majority of the fight. I think every round was his from round 7 onwards. So the first half of the fight, I think he probably nicked 1 or 2. So looking at that, plus 2 knockdowns awarded, and the first knockdown shouldn't have counted, I agree, but it was. Yeah, I think he well won on the cards. Untitled Bobby C. Can't help but feel chuffed for Joe Parker. Seems like a sound dude and takes on anyone. He is a sound dude in all my dealings with him, and that includes going out drinking with him after a dinner at BT Tower. He was a very, very good guy. And the ladies seemed to be incredibly attracted to him. He was having none of it, of course. He's a family man. But it was nice for the rest of us to kind of have some cool by association points. Mikal says, the easiest bet ever. Hopefully Ngannou is all right. I mean, we've seen him give plenty of interviews post-fight. He seems fine. Crimson Titan Ikenga Nato, probably butchered that, says, I believe Ngannou's trainers approach the fight with a different mindset, somewhat disrespectful to AJ and the sport. Wizard Sleeve, Fury beat a useless twerker who was too scared to fight anybody else. Big deal. Wow. Marcus Harmon just says, absolutely. Appreciate that. Timo Hoffman again. Can you imagine what state Zhang would have left division if he was 10 years younger with more than 20 punches in him per fight? I don't think it's an age thing with Zhang. I think it's more the fact that he's got that explosive style. We've seen it from other fighters in the past who were younger. You know, your likes of Jeff Lacey, David Haye, obviously a much better fighter, but they've got that explosive fast twitch style that doesn't enable them, or in fact stops them throwing loads of punches per round. It's kind of the price you pay for having that level of power. Mucky, I still think Ngannou versus White could be an entertaining fight. Perhaps we don't know what's going to happen with Dillian White beyond his comeback contest out in Ireland, which I'm sure we're all looking forward to seeing what he's got in the locker for that one, going up against Christian Hammer, of course. Thunder Road says, chat, don't forget to hit the thumbs up. Completely endorse Thunder Road's comments as long as they're about thumbs up. Malcolm Marcel, beating Ngannou was about respect for his sport. I don't think it was no more than that. DB Cooper 1, welcome. He says, evening, Mr. Flexen, and not Mr. Amon, although he says AM. He's got a bit of a typo finger there. How was the Real Cons weekend carrying Radio Raheem's bags? Mate, if he was indeed doing that, and I'm not for a second saying he was, I imagine it was quite tough, because I can imagine Mr. Radio Raheem travels like a diva. Ibrahim says, is it confirmed that IBF will strip the belt immediately after the first undisputed fight? I mean, they haven't come out and put a statement to that effect, but Frank Warren's pretty much conceded that's what's going to happen. Emmanuel Ossie, coming to box for the first time, Ngannou dealt with world champion Fury, and he started talking anyhow without respecting AJ. Talk is cheap. I think if you'd come and, almost beaten the reigning lineal and WBC world champion, you'd probably have a inflated view of your own boxing ability as well. I think we can forgive Ngannou that. DB Cooper 1 having a bit of a pop at Josh's haircut. We're not having that, mate. Come on. Unless we can see you, DB Cooper, and you put your face in your profile picture, you can't insult anyone else. That's the rule, unfortunately. Insider NJ says Tyson Fairy. That's the beginning and the end of the post. Wizard Sleeve says only twats dye their beard. Not sure who that's directed at. I certainly don't dye mine. I mean, it's barely a beard. But yeah, maybe, is that a Conor Benn dig? Was it him that dyed his beard? No. Or was it Eubank Jr.? I remember something vaguely. Anyway, let's not get sidetracked by beard dyeing. Let's talk about Anthony Joshua's next move. Because people were talking about what AJ was going to do next, even before the Ngannou fight. So maybe they were all a lot more confident that AJ would get the job done with minimum fuss than I was. But Josh and I put together this video earlier today, which is giving me far too much credit, to be fair. It was Josh that did all the hard work. In terms of what AJ's next move would be, I just did the voiceover, provided my dulcet tones. I'm sure everyone's grateful for that. But the main option seemed to be AJ fighting Filip Hrgović for the vacant IBF title, assuming it is stripped or vacated after Fury Usyk won. AJ waiting to see what happens with Fury and Usyk, and potentially coming in to fight the winner before any Fury Usyk rematch, which Eddie Hearn said in the build-up. I mean, he is going to say that. But he said that's a possibility. He believes Turkey, Al Sheikh, will throw lots of money at Joshua to fight the winner, especially after the Ngannou fight. And the loser of Fury Usyk will have to wait a while before the rematch. I'm not sure that's going to go down too well. And Tyson Fury, before the weekend, said he doesn't see that happening because of the rematch clause. But yeah, so that's another potential option for Joshua. Or he could sit on the shelf, safeguard his position, and fight the Fury Usyk rematch winner. But then that leaves AJ inactive for quite a long time. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Or he could fight someone else. So I'll ask for Josh's take shortly. But we're going to put out a poll. Basically, what should AJ do next? Should he, A, fight Filip Hrgović for the IBF? Or B, should he wait for the Fury Usyk winner? Let us know what you think in the poll, and we will give you the results at the end of the show. But Josh, what do you think AJ should do next?
Should do is dependent really on the situation between Usyk and Fury. It's so unclear what's going to happen there. The rematch, of course, is part of the contract and part of the plans, but whether that comes off is very much a different story. I'd certainly be keen to stay active if I was AJ. He had 3 fights last year. He's obviously started this year strongly as well, and he seems to be really benefiting from having consistent action again and consistently staying busy. When he wasn't quite as active and he took the losses to Usyk and previously Andy Ruiz, that he was really hampered by not having that consistent schedule and probably not having that mental focus either, which was taken away with all the time off. So the fact that he had the 3 fights last year, he started this year strongly. If he's able to get a fight early summer, whether that is the winner of Fury and Usyk or it is Hrgovic, I would be keen for him to have that fight. But if it isn't to be the Fury Usyk winner, then absolutely Hrgovic is the way to go. It's a world title. It's certainly a challenge. He's a terrific fighter, Hrgovic, and he's been waiting for this opportunity for a long, long time now. I think it would be capturing the interest of the boxing public, especially here in the UK. It's a world title fight with AJ in, and I think it would be interesting to see how he deals with the frame and the challenges that Hrgovic would pose, because he's an awkward fighter. And I think if I'd be looking to keep him active, and Hrgovic would probably be top of the list for me.
Well, yeah, as I said in the aforementioned video with my Oscar-nominated voiceover, it is the first belt that AJ won as a pro, the IBF title. Well, not the first belt. I think he had like a WBC International at one point. But the first world title was the IBF against the, again, aforementioned Charles Martin. Hrgovic will be a tougher challenge than Martin, I would imagine, at this stage of their careers. I don't think you can read too much into Hrgovic from that struggle against Zhilei Zhang. He obviously went into that fight not long after his father had passed away, and he certainly struggled in the early rounds of that one. Pulled it round, controversial decision, or contentious decision, maybe more accurately. But I think Hrgovic has got all the basics nailed down. He's a very good fighter, does everything well. I'd be backing AJ to win that fight, but I think he'd get a much tougher test than he just has enjoyed against Francis Ngannou. So we'll see. Yeah, I mean, AJ, I think a lot of what he's been doing recently has been based on that activity level. And I think waiting it out for too long in the hope of fighting the Fury Usyk winner and jumping the queue, if you like, unless you know for certain that's going to be a possibility, and that means Fury and Usyk both agreeing to that, probably ahead of the first fight, you wouldn't risk it. I think Hrgovic, AJ goes into it as a favourite. He gets another payday. It keeps him busy. IBF title, which will help his contractual leverage when it comes to challenging the winner of Fury Usyk, whether it's one fight or two. I think fighting Hrgovic in the meantime makes all the sense in the world. And you've got to imagine Hrgovic will be up for the fight. He's waited for his world title shot for so long. And coming against Anthony Joshua just increases the purse exponentially for him. So let's get that one on. Let's make that as close to Fury Usyk one as possible. So then the winners can potentially clash later this year. Or if there's a rematch, maybe AJ has another fight towards the end of the year and then the winners clash in the spring. But yeah, I'd certainly think the Hrgovic fight first makes sense. Timo Hoffman says, don't know how people believe Francis punches as hard as pro heavyweight boxers. They literally specialise in punching, have technique mastered. I think there's people out there that said Ngannou's a harder puncher than Fury. Than Joshua. So I think that's probably part of it. I think Josh did an interview with Mark Tibbs where he said words to that effect. So it's not just people, media and fans. It is people in the boxing business as well. And I think there is a case to be made that just hitting an object full force, regardless of technique or hitting a moving target and so on, just hitting a punch pad or whatever it might be, maybe does hit harder. Maybe, velocity is stronger than Anthony Joshua's, but it's a lot different when you involve technique and a moving target and so on. Wizard Sleeve says Dyson Fury sucks. Getting a slight impression, Wizard Sleeve, that you're not the biggest Fury fan. I could be wrong. Crimson Titan, I'm not going to read the whole thing, it's too hard, says AJ needs to stay active. There you go. Thanks, mate. I should have read your whole name because you agreed with me. Bertolini says, why do so many seem to forget Ruiz took the same shot on the chin and went to KO him, and AJ couldn't land one of those in 24 rounds on Usyk? Nothing has changed except everyone thought MMA guy has a chin. I think it's more Joshua's, as I was saying earlier, his approach that people are really excited about. The gung-ho, reckless, search and destroy AJ that a lot of people have been hoping for recently. Now, it's whether that approach is down to the quality of opposition or lack of, or whether it's just an instilled mindset change now. Jasvinder Suri says, fight Dillian. I bet that's why Dillian jumped into a fight early next week after just getting cleared. So he's ready for AJ in the summer. Eddie Hearn actually ruled that fight out in advance of the weekend. He said, if AJ comes through Ngannou, he's only interested in the really big fights. He's probably only got 5 to 7 fights left in his career. This is what he told Radio Raheem. And in those 5 to 7 fights, he only wants the very big world title fights. So I don't know. You know, money changes people's minds, of course. If Dillian Whyte looks great in his comeback fight against Christian Hammer, spoiler alert, don't think he will, because no one looks good against Christian Hammer these days. But if he does, and that feud can be reignited somehow, perhaps. Pop-Off 93 Boxing and Sports says, AJ, stay active, don't wait, then you'll get all the belts back. Just believe in yourself and keep your confidence. Bless you, Pop-Off 93, for thinking AJ's actually watching this. I mean, he might be. We're very popular in the Watford area, I believe. Watford demographic is strong. Ray says, fight Wilder, and AJ closes the loop on Fury opponents. Yes, very good point. Timo Hoffman, it's like failing your degree, resitting your GCSEs and thinking you're master's level. Yeah, I mean, that's a very specific analogy there. DB Cooper 1 says, fight Hrgovic. You can't trust Fury or wait around for him. If he did fight Fury, it wouldn't be till November or December at this rate. Yeah, very good point. Dan this is the best Joshua we've seen. The beast who fought Ruiz and was dropping fighters like flies. People say that, but have you ever tried punching a fly? Not as easy as it sounds. Malcolm Marcel says, who said Turki Al-Sheikh would be interested in putting up the money for a rematch? Well, if he's the kind of power broker who's helped make the both fighters sign the contract initially, and the rematch clause was in that contract, doesn't it follow that he's going to have a say in that? Wizard Sleeve, I accused him of being a Fury hater, but I'll take it all back now because he said Fury will probably duck again or lose. Mark Edwards says Tyson Fury the best heavyweight ever. Mucky said might as well fight Hrgovic for the title, but Parker rematch would be better. How sellable is a Parker rematch though? I'm not convinced. Parker's on great form at the moment, looking really good and everything, but the first AJ Parker fight was neither exciting nor particularly close. So I don't know. It depends how long that's lived in the memories. John Isaac Morris says Fury gets caught by that punch by Joshua. It's good night, unfortunately. Well, yeah, I think if anyone gets caught by that particular punch from Joshua, it's good night. It's just whether they're going to be a sitting target in the same way Ngannou was. Wilder won't be too keen on AJ, says Crimson Titan. He might want an Otto Vallin. Yeah, I mean, no disrespect to Otto Vallin. I think he's a lot better than he looked in that Joshua fight and has proved in previous fights. DB Cooper 1, Hearn's only interested in big fights, he says. Fights like Conor Benn versus a 45-year-old bloke long retired and never been the same, who is naturally smaller. We're going to be talking about that very subject in not too long, DB Cooper 1. So save your vitriol if you can for a few more minutes. And as for that particular quote from Hearn, he didn't say he was only interested in big fights himself. He said AJ's only interested in big fights because he's only got 5 to 7 fights left in his career. Liam66 says, are there many heavyweights coming up to replace the current crop? Is the heavyweight division ready to be handed over, or there are not enough stars yet to take over? It's the interesting one. There's a lot of fighters kind of on the cusp, either between European level or outside of Europe at, fringe world title level. Your likes of Jared Big Baby Anderson or who else we got? You got Fabio Wardley over here, of course, and plenty of other fighters. Ajit Kabayel is someone that gets mentioned, probably on the fringes of world class. But there's no one particularly you'd say they're the heir apparent. I know a lot of people hire Moses Italma, for example. We shall see. Maybe the chat can suggest who they think is going to be the kind of heir apparent to the top 3 at the moment: Fury, Joshua, and Usyk. But we shall see. DB Cooper 1 says, vitriol, don't get me started, Flexen. I've not even warmed up. Mate, that's what we're relying on you to warm up in time for the second half of the show. You've got to come on strong in the championship rounds like every good champion does. But yeah, so we've talked a lot about Joshua Ngannou, but that wasn't the only fight in Riyadh. So we should talk a little bit about the undercard. And while we were incredibly impressed with Joseph Parker, felt he was a fair winner over Zhilei Zhang despite the knockdowns against him. Zhang, as we've seen before, didn't really do much in the second half of the fight. And Parker, it's hard to begrudge him another big win. The fight that's caused a lot of talk and probably made a lot more people worldwide aware, hard to say that, of who Nick Ball is the draw between him and WBC featherweight champion Ray Vargas. Some people say it was a close fight and only biased UK fans say that Nick Ball was robbed. I then must be one of those biased UK fans because I thought Nick Ball was robbed. I was shocked when it was announced as a draw, almost as shocked as I was if you'd have told me at the halfway point of the fight that Nick Ball had a shot at winning, because he was pretty far behind and I just couldn't see the fight pattern changing. But change it did. And whether you agree with the first knockdown, I don't. The referee called it, and as such, the judges would have included it in their scorecards. But he didn't get the decision. I thought the scorecard that had Vargas ahead was a ridiculous one. I think you've got to give Nick Ball at least one of the first 6 rounds. I think I gave him 2. And in the second half of the fight, he appeared to romp it. Adding the 2 knockdowns, I find it hard to see how he didn't win. But chat, I'm sure you'll tell me if I'm wrong about that. Josh, what did you make of Ray Vargas against Nick Ball?
I had a similar scorecard to yourself, Danny. I'd have probably given him probably one of the opening 6, and then that second half of the fight, he was really cruising. He sort of came into his own and seemed to really settle and find his rhythm in the second half of the fight. And yeah, added with those 2 knockdowns, I'd like to think he's at least 1 or 2 points up on the cards, but apparently not. And the one positive you have to give Nick Ball out of this is, one, he didn't lose, which is something, and the fact that his name is very much out there. He's going to get another big payday, hopefully out in Saudi against Ray Vargas, and we can see the rematch. And look, if it goes anything like that, then Nick Ball will be a world champion eventually. Just unfortunate it didn't happen this time around. But I guess, like you, Danny, I'm one of those UK fans, part of the Nick Ball fan club that is a little bit biased. But for me, it was a Nick Ball victory on the night, and I hope he does get that rematch whenever he and Ray Vargas are ready, and he can become a world champion, because I think he deserved it.
Mr. Wonderful here, maybe Paul Orndorff, probably not. I'm not sure actually if he's still alive. Francis was not trained properly. His trainer should drop the dreads and start teaching him defensive tactics. Before I read the rest of this comment, I don't understand how cutting his dreadlock hair will help him become a better coach. You might have to explain that one to me. Is it kind of a reverse Samson type thing? Let me know. He was nothing but a standing target and didn't move out of range when he should have. Yeah, I mean, range is different, isn't it, in MMA and boxing? It sounds simplistic, but it's a fact. And I think, fighting Tyson Fury, who's a less orthodox fighter than Anthony Joshua, probably didn't really prepare him for going up against a traditional boxer in that sense. Popoff 93, boxing and sports. Parker outboxed Zhang easy. Zhang gassed out. Nick Ball won. He didn't know, did he? He drew, that's the problem. DB Coupon says, nah, how the fuck was that a close fight? Vargas was running a marathon. Paul pushed the whole fight and was never troubled. Hope Saudis bring back Nick Ball. I mean, Ball did lose the majority of the first 6 rounds, though. I don't think you can deny that. That's what made it a close fight. He was struggling to get into range early on. He kept getting claimed inside as well. But he became more ruthless, more clinical, cut the ring down better in the second half. Thunder Road, Nick Ball is better suited for the WWE as part of the British Strong Style with Pete Dunne and Tyler Bate. Thunder Road, you're speaking my language. I was looking at an Instagram video of Pete Dunne and Tyler Bate earlier, actually. But yeah, I'm sure that's another career for him. He'll need to work on his promos, though. That's my only comment on that. Andrew Lennox Gordon, I thought Ball made Vargas look fairly mediocre. Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't think Vargas will have come up against anyone remotely like Nick Ball in size or style before, whereas Nick Ball, pretty much everyone he fights is taller than him and tries to keep him off. So I think that's a bit of a disadvantage there for Vargas. I think Vargas might be improved if they do have a rematch as well, because he'll be used to what Ball brings to the table now. But it's going to be a tough... I mean, you'll never have an easy fight with Nick Ball, I don't think. So yeah, I 100%, I haven't watched it back yet, and I will at some point, but I can't see my mind changing. I thought Nick Ball's a clear winner, or should have been a clear winner, I should say. So yeah, I enjoyed the undercard. Wasn't a lot going on beyond those top 3 fights, but I know a lot of people enjoyed some of the others. There was another world title fight, wasn't there? Madrimov. That was a good one as well, against Kurbanov. We've seen Kurbanov get that couple of dodgy decisions in his favour in the past, most notably against Liam Smith. So I think there's a lot of people happy to see Madrimov get the job done there. But it's a main event show, but for a show that is all about the main event, the undercard did deliver, so that was nice to see. Another thing we saw that's got a lot of people talking out in Saudi was one of the promoters of the show and one of the major organisers of the show, entering the arena together. Now, normally that wouldn't cause much of a furore at all. But it seems we've got people talking that Frank Warren entered holding the hand, or his hand being held, more accurately, by Turki Al Sheikh. I'm sure many memes have been made since then. I mean, I suppose it underlines how close their relationship is and perhaps the position of power that both men currently hold in boxing. What did you make of it, Josh?
Very, yeah, a little bit of a weird one. It has to be said. Not something I think you can expect to see in the UK. Can't imagine Ben Shalom walking out of a boxer show hand in hand with a broadcaster or anybody like that. But anyway, yeah, it was certainly an interesting one, and illustrates the power that Turki Al Sheikh has and Frank Warren, as you say, has over in Saudi, and really ruling the roost at the moment up there, and the shows that they're producing. You look back sort of 2 years ago, and we seem to be seeing some absolutely incredible fights, and the matchups are the ones that we've been hoping for, and the ones that we haven't had over here in the UK. So I don't think you can complain too much about the fights that we're actually seeing and the shift in power. If we'd obviously like the fights to be happening over here, but if they're not makeable, the finances aren't there, then look, if we want to see the fights, they might have to happen in Saudi. And as far as Warren's involvement goes, it's great to see the fighters in his stable involved, and the same goes for Eddie Hearn. So yeah, just great that we're seeing the big matchups, really.
DB Cooper 1 says, it's funny, but it's a cultural thing, lads. I've seen it in the Middle East and India on my travels. Same way Europeans kiss when greeting. I don't kiss anyone when greeting, by the way. Odd to some, normal to others. It's a sign of respect/royalty. Yeah, I mean, Warren didn't look overly comfortable with it, to be honest. I'm not saying he didn't give his consent or anything like that. But I am saying that he did look disgruntled when the camera zoomed in on him, it has to be said. It did feel like, a respect for your elders thing more so than just general respect. It felt like, taking your granddad to his ringside seat, do you know what I mean? And Turki Al Sheikh is maybe not that much younger than Warren that he could be his grandparent, but still. Liam66 said it was a one-sided power move, in my opinion. Frank had no choice, it looked like. Yeah, it did have a bit of the kind of captive quality of it. I'll ask him next time I speak to him how he felt about that. I asked him before about how he felt about holding hands with Turki Al Sheikh and Eddie Hearn in those promo shots. And he didn't seem overly bothered, although he's more keen to focus on the kind of zombie promo video that they shot. I think it does underline, though, that Warren at the moment certainly seems to be the kind of lead promoter in these sort of events, even on a show where Anthony Joshua, famously a matchroom fighter, and didn't want to have any questions from Queensbury's Dev Sarni previously at a press conference. He was the main event. But it still seems that Warren, if Turki Al Sheikh's got a favourite, it certainly seems to be Warren more so than Eddie Hearn or any of the other promoters that have contributed to these shows. It's a great position for Warren to be in, I guess you have to consider the golden age of his career. I'm not saying he hasn't got ages left. I'm sure he has. He's just celebrated his 72nd birthday. And if Bob Arum's anything to go by, Warren's got plenty of time left in the sport. However, the fact that it's like a fairy godmother's just turned up in his life. At the age of 72, he's been not struggling, but he's been working hard, toiling away at a coalface all these years. And there's been myriad ups and downs, the rise of Sky Sports boxing, or even the original breaking in and defying the cartel to do the deal with ITV, and then the great times on Sky Sports, and then Box Nation when he left Sky, and everyone was questioning what was going to happen there and wondered if he'd be able to compete. The rise of Eddie Hearn, of course, didn't do anything great for Queensbury at the time. And then the link up with Tyson Fury back in the spotlight, and now at the forefront of these, Saudi Arabia, Riyadh specifically, establishing itself as a power base in boxing. It's great for Warren, and if he can use it to kind of solidify his position going forward, I think it'll be even better for him. If he can use it to blood some of his younger talents and make them more well-known on a worldwide scale. I want to see Anthony Yard and some of the other younger Warren fighters on some of these Riyadh shows, and then gradually have them headlining shows back in the UK, because as these promoters keep telling us, it's really important that we have these big UK shows alongside the mega events that are taking place in Saudi. They keep telling us, but I don't see quite as much evidence of those big UK shows yet, except with Boxer, of course, who aren't really participating in the Saudi stuff. So they've really only got the UK at the moment. And they've got a big show that they're announcing on Wednesday in Wales, I believe. But yeah, let's look at some of the chats. Where are we? Nick Ball. Power move, cultural thing. Phil Macaque said, very good. The Arabs don't mind if boxers take roids, and that's the reason AJ took the fight. He wouldn't have took the fight with Ngannou if it wasn't for the roids. Yeah, I think your name's pretty well, apt for you, Phil. DB Cooper 1, it's good to see Frank Warren do well. Matchroom Monopoly isn't really that healthy for wider British boxing as much as I think they're the best. More the merrier. Hearn would shut people out. Yeah, I mean, I think they're all just happy to be supping at the trough at the moment, to be honest. But I think they do need to have a mind on the future of their respective companies and the sport in general. You know, let's use this money and this profile that we're getting, I say we, from the Saudi shows and translate it back to the UK wherever possible. Thunder Road says, this is the third Saudi show and they are far too long start to finish. They really need to tighten up the fighting windows. It's hard to stay engaged when the card is 6 hours. I don't think it's just the fact it's 6 hours. I think because obviously there's probably Steve Goodwin shows at York Hall that have about 22 fights on them. But they cram all that into those 6 hours. The problem is the big gaps between fights. And as much as I like punditry, you know, as much as the next man, I don't want to hear. I mean, I had it on Sky, so I'm going to give that away when I say, you know, I don't want to hear Johnny Nelson and Anna Wilhouse going on for an hour, or 45 minutes between every fight. As good as they are at their jobs, and I've got a lot of time for them, especially Johnny. But come on, you know, we want to see the action. The reason people tune in is to watch two men, for the most part. I'm certainly in Saudi, have a scrap. You know, we love talking about boxing. That's why we're here right now. But generally, we want it in short spurts. Again, not referring to us specifically because we do an hour every Monday. But we want, you know, maybe 20 minutes between each fight. Is that too much to ask? They're paying so well at the moment. Surely they can run the show however they want. I'm assuming the long gaps are at least partly due to TV reasons. When I was out in Abu Dhabi, was it last year or the end of the year before? There was a gap of around an hour and a half between the chief support and the main event. And that was because of US television wanting to have Bivol and Zerno Ramirez on at a decent time over in America. So I think a lot of it is to do with TV. But if that bit can be mitigated somehow, no one wants those long gaps between fights. And as I said at the very start of the show, it does seem churlish to complain about relatively minor things when we're getting these big fights and big events and the boxers are getting paid well and boxing's getting a spotlight unlike it has, you know, in the last few years. But yeah, think of some of us older boxing fans, referring to myself specifically now. I don't really want to stay up past midnight to watch AJ against Ngannou, as you know, as explosive a performance as it turned out to be. Liam66 says, does Shalom get a contract extension? Sky are obviously desperate to be involved, airing their shows, so can't be happy not having their fighters on. Yeah, I mean, I think it's more a case of Turkey Al Sheikh wants, and Saudi generally wants those shows to be seen by the most amount of people possible, which is why they're sharing it out amongst different broadcasters. You know, let's be honest here. This is an advert for Saudi. All these big sporting events are the Grand Prix at the weekend, the snooker, the boxing. They're all events to show Saudi is a progressive country that's doing really well and, you know, a next great tourist destination and so on. And the sports washing aspect, which we've never denied on Seconds Out. And I think for that to be served, the more powerful broadcasters that are involved worldwide, the better. So I don't think that's necessarily a case of, you know, Sky being desperate to be involved. I think it's more Turkey Al Sheikh needing all the major broadcasters to be involved. As for Shalom getting a contract extension, I believe Boxer's contract with Sky runs until November this year. So I assume that's what you're referring to. I think it's more dependent on whether Sky want to stick with boxing in general. I think if they want to stick with boxing in general, it's better the devil you know. There isn't really anyone else out there who's in a position to take the Sky contract from a boxing promoter perspective. That was another tongue twister. But if they want to stay involved in boxing, if they believe boxing is valuable to them, if they rate it highly in their portfolio of sports, then I think Shalom's got a good chance. But it's that point that I have doubts over. With Adam Smith not there anymore, I'm not sure there's the appetite for boxing on Sky there once was. Jay Speaks His Mind says, I understand none of us has a crystal ball, but why did people really think Ngannou would beat Joshua? See, I've heard this narrative a lot. You know, a lot of boxing people saying, oh, I knew all along. Real boxing people knew that AJ had knocked him out. I can't think of someone that I saw, fan-wise or boxer-wise, that was actually predicting an Ngannou victory. A lot of people thought he'd do better than he did, and that's fair enough. You can criticise that. But I don't see many people that actually predicted Ngannou would win the fight. Liam66 says, scheduling you'd think would be the easy bit after getting all the fighters to sign. It depends. Sometimes the broadcasters can be just as difficult as the fighters and the fighters' management, I think. DB Cooper 1, good to have Sky back on a big fight. They clearly do the big numbers. The promo in the F1 football was huge. Does AJ even does half the numbers he did on Sky on DAZN? Yeah, I'm not sure. We'd have to have a look at DAZN's figures and what they release and so on. And Sky don't always release pay-per-view figures, of course. But there's no doubt that with Sky Sports News and the availability of Sky compared to DAZN, it's always going to do a bigger audience, isn't it? Let's not rewrite history. Almost every poll had Francis winning by KO on both Sky and DAZN polls. Yeah, but that's anonymous people. You can't really criticise anyone specifically for picking Ngannou because he came out on top of a couple of polls. You know, we'd have to know who actually voted and whether they were serious votes or whether they were just trolling. But we may never know that. So that's a few of the major talking points from Riyadh. Josh, I feel like you haven't spoken for ages because I'm a motor mouth, but we will involve you in the next one straight away, straight off the bat. One of the other things that got people talking was a potential fight between two boxers who weren't actually on the card but were there spectating. And that is the senator himself, Manny Pacquiao, who we haven't seen in the ring for quite some time, and Conor Benn, who we have seen but not in a UK ring for quite some time and for very different reasons. Potentially, apparently in advanced negotiations to fight against each other. They did a little interview together with our Radio Raheem, which you can see on the channel. Yeah, Josh, what do you make of it? And do you see that fight happening?
Surprised to hear it was in advanced negotiations because prior to sort of seeing those two ringside, we hadn't really seen anything around that. I think it had probably been mentioned briefly following Conor Benn's last fight, the win over Peter Dobson, but certainly not with any seriousness. How do I view the fight? Not something I'm particularly interested in seeing Manny Pacquiao come out of retirement, if he is indeed in retirement. He's had one fight in 5 years. How much has he got left? How much training has he been doing outside of all the other commitments he has? You know, he's got his political interests, and he's obviously a big figure out in the Philippines. So is boxing his main focus? I'd be surprised if it was. It obviously is for Conor Benn, who's looking to continue his comeback and get closer to a world title. So it does a lot of good for Conor Benn. He would have Manny Pacquiao on his record, albeit a Manny Pacquiao has only fought once in 5 years and is in his mid-40s. And I think we've seen a similar storyline with former opponents of Conor Benn, people towards the back end of their careers, whether it be a Van Heerden or a Chris Algieri, I think Samuel Vargas as well, you could probably throw into that mix. So I think you look at the names that have been targeted for Ben before, and it's probably goes into a similar category, maybe even more of an extreme category. And I'd like to see him fight somebody who's in his prime or near enough, and would be able to sort of offer a bit more jeopardy. So not something I'm particularly interested in seeing. I am surprised actually that it's something that Pacquiao is interested in being involved in.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what the benefit is from Pacquiao's point of view. Maybe they're offering him massive money. Maybe Eddie Hearn is. Maybe it helps with his political career. The higher his profile is worldwide. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. It's obvious the benefits from Ben's side. You know, you get a living legend, one of the best fighters ever in the sport, and certainly of his generation. Very much on the back end of his career. I imagine Ben would probably start as the favourite with the bookmakers, I guess, because of being, you know, in his prime. And Pacquiao's been not just way past his prime, but also inactive in recent times. But yeah, it's not a fight that particularly appeals to me. I'd like to see Ben fight some of the best fighters at his natural weight, at welterweight. I know Pacquiao most recently has been at welterweight. But I'd like to see him against, you know, Keith Thurman or a Boots Ennis or someone of that, even Errol Spence perhaps, or Mario Barrios. There's a few options there, but I suppose none of them have got the stardust that Manny Pacquiao brings. And he is a living legend, and getting the name of Manny Pacquiao on your record, albeit a faded version, it won't say that on your record. I can understand the interest, and I wonder where the fight would be. Would it be out in Saudi? I guess it probably would. More so because Ben, we haven't heard the result of Ben's hearing yet. The appeal from the board and UCAD against Ben's suspension being lifted about fighting in the UK. So I'd imagine that would be out in Saudi Arabia. So it's an intriguing fight. It's a weird, random one that's just seemingly come out of nowhere. I wonder if they just bumped into each other in Riyadh and talks began there, although it says they're in advanced talks. Maybe they got advanced very quickly. Fair play to them. See, I'm so shocked by the fight. It's caused a bit of a frog in my throat. Yeah, I would back... I don't know. Would I back Ben to win? It's so hard to know what Pacquiao's got left because we haven't seen him in the ring for a while. If the Pacquiao that beat Keith Thurman turns up, then he'll give Ben all the trouble he can handle. But if it's a shop-worn, shot to pieces, not really training very hard Manny Pacquiao that shows up, then you'd have to back Ben. And I know that would stick in the craw of a lot of boxing fans to see Ben get a victory over any version of Manny Pacquiao. But let's just see what the chat's got to say about it. And while you're there, please do still vote in our poll if you haven't already. We're asking very simply, what should Anthony Joshua do next? Fight Filip Hrgović for the vacant IBF title, or wait to fight the winner of Tyson Fury against Alexander Usyk? Let us know what you think. Right, let's have a look. Ben versus Pac-Man. This is DB Cooper 1. Ben versus Pac-Man is worse than Paul versus Tyson. That's Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, in case you haven't heard the news and, you know, you might need the smelling salts now. Hypocritical seeing Hearn slander Tyson fight, rightly so, and then announcing this 25-year-old versus 45-year-old. Ben is a real pro, Jake isn't. Yeah, but Tyson's a lot older, isn't he, than Manny Pacquiao, and a lot further removed from his prime as a fighter. So I can understand. I wouldn't put them in the same category. And Ben is a professional fighter, whereas Jake Paul, I mean, he is, but he's a novice pro, isn't he? Whereas Ben's on the fringe of world title contention. Where else? DB Cooper 1. There's like 1 million Filipinos in Saudi Arabia, by the way, so it makes sense for Manny. Biggest money in front of his people, and it oddly sells in Saudi. Yeah, I suppose Saudi is kind of the crossover capital now, isn't it? So you can understand why. And yeah, I didn't know the Filipino population in Saudi was that big. But yeah, I guess now you say that, it does make sense. Ray, alluding to our earlier subject, says, I do not think the Hrgović fight will work until the first Fury versus Usyk is over. AJ cannot wait for IBF to make a decision. I don't think IBF have got a decision to make. I think their rules are pretty clear. I think as soon as the first bell rings in that fight, they'll take the title away or he'll vacate it. But having said that, surely, you know, Matchroom can find out what the IBF are going to decide. How hard can that be if you know the right people? Mucky says Ben versus Pac-Man is the same as Paul versus Tyson. I mean, I disagree, but, you know, I understand what you're saying. Wizard Sleeve, the Ngannou loving is well and truly over. Yeah, I can't disagree with that. A National Acrobat says Joshua should give Ruiz Jr. the rubber match, unfinished business there. Yeah, but has Ruiz done anything to really earn a big fight at this stage of his career, whereas AJ's got back on the horse and he's been winning and so on? Ruiz has been very inactive. Simon Brandy, Fury won't fight AJ regardless of the outcome of the Usyk fight. He won't risk becoming a meme. Ooh, that sounds like fighting talk, and he is a real fighting man. Gypsy Boy says, who cares about AJ? Fury will beat Usyk and be the best of this generation, number one. Anderson De Silva says, when is Big John Fury fighting? Yeah, it's a weird one. I really wanted someone to get his take. Obviously, we didn't speak to him out in Riyadh, but it would have been good to get his take on Mike Tyson and Jake Paul, considering he's opposed Jake Paul in the corner of Tommy Fury, and he's always apparently wanted to fight Mike Tyson, especially given John was a heavyweight himself, obviously nowhere near the accomplishments of a Mike Tyson, and also named his son after the former youngest ever world heavyweight champion, or still the youngest ever world heavyweight champion. Anderson De Silva also says, I believe AJ will beat Fury now. Lutunaga Logavatu says, Fury ain't lost to the same guy twice, though. Well, he hasn't lost to anyone, has he? You know, a lot will argue he should have lost to John McDermott early in his career. But yeah, contentious decisions aside, he hasn't lost to anyone as a pro. So, DB Cooper 1, I wonder how many more sons John Fury has we've never heard of. More kids than the factory that made my pair of Nike's Air Force Ones. Well, at least you're pretty au fait with slave labour, DB Cooper 1. Gypsy Boy, no way AJ beats Fury, yous are mad. Well, I think everyone's kind of fans of particular fighters, aren't they? So I'm not sure who's right and who's wrong on that one. Hopefully we get to see them actually fight and find out. Really appreciate you all tuning in. Before we do our closing remarks, let's get the result up of the poll. We asked you a very simple question, binary choice. What should Anthony Joshua do next? Should he fight Filip Hrgovic for the vacant IBF title? We assume it will be vacant by then. Or should he wait for the Fury versus Usyk winner? And we've got 59% say he should fight Hrgovic, and only 40%, I say only, I mean, it's pretty close, say wait for the Fury versus Usyk winner. Whatever happens to the other 1%, we do not know. It's the same place as David Hayes' old promoter's algorithm, perhaps, which we never really got to the bottom of. Ivo PRC says AJ needs to stay active. Fight with Hrgovic would be a great fight. I think it would be something like the Klitschko fight. Wow. I mean, that's heady praise indeed, considering that was the fight that brought 90,000, sorry, Carl, and the world's round, into Wembley. Liam66 says, it's mad the disrespect Usyk gets. He beat AJ conclusively twice, probably has the best heavyweight win in the last 10 years. Yeah, that's a very good point. He probably has. I mean, it depends. It depends how much you buy into the Wilder kind of hype and intimidation factor before Fury first beat him, or Fury Klitschko, that was still within the 10-year window, right? Wasn't that 2015? Or was it 2014? Oh, no, it might have been 20. Yeah, but then it's still, if it's late in the year. Yeah, so in the last 10 years, Liam 66, I think it would be Fury going to Germany and beating Klitschko, who hadn't lost in 11 years, in fairness, and had reigned at the top of the division for that long as well. So he can have the second best heavyweight win in the last 10 years, although I will have to check the date. I'm pretty sure it was 2015. Because 2014, towards the end of 2014, was Fury Chisora 2. So yeah, I think the Klitschko fight was 2015. I think. I've said I think about 5 times there because I'm really not sure. Anderson Silva said, Big John said drop Ben Davison, and now Ben is with AJ. Yeah, but just because he thought Ben Davison shouldn't work with Tyson Fury at that point, Fury then went with Sugar Hill Stewart, had some of the best wins of his career. So, you know, a trainer can be right for one fighter and not another. It's not necessarily, you know, you're good with him, so you'll be good with anyone. DB Cooper 1, Hrgovic is boring as fuck, I can't lie. Him versus AJ doesn't do numbers unless it's on Sky. Now that AJ's back in the casual public's good books. The KO went all around my work. So people in McDonald's are talking about AJ's KO. Dominic Pirry says you can't box Usyk. AJ a different beast with Ben Davison. AJ smokes, knocks Usyk out next time. He smokes, knocks him out. Well, there you go. That's a different type of knockout. He smokes and knocks him out. He smokes, then knocks him out. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that. But yeah, I think it'll certainly be interesting. Is AJ a different beast with Ben Davison, or is he a different beast when he's fighting a predominantly MMA athlete? We will see. But we appreciate you all watching. Hopefully, when AJ's not just had a big knockout next Monday, you'll all come back. We can only hope. But give us your comments if you're watching on the playback. You've missed the live chat, which is always fun. But we don't want to discriminate. So please do still leave your comments and we will respond to some of them. Give us a thumbs up if you haven't already. And please do subscribe. Josh, as is customary for the co-host, and I know you're desperate for yourself not to be the co-host again next week. So we've got another reason for hoping Eamon Khan makes it safe home to his wife and kids. He hasn't got a wife or kids, but couldn't resist the Tony Benny reference. Josh, what are your closing remarks to the wonderful SO Live audience?
No, it's been a pleasure to be involved again, Danny. And if you do call on me next week, next Monday. I will be ready and waiting for the call as ever. Big week coming up on Seconds Out. Magnificent 7 returns this weekend. I'll be in Sheffield the following weekend. So the shows keep on rolling. Maybe not Anthony Joshua this week, but it is the return of the juggernaut Joe Joyce. So plenty coming up, and we'll have you covered on Seconds Out. Thank you very much for joining us again.
Thanks, guys.